The stars stretched endlessly across the black canvas of space as the Seraphim drift glided silently through the Outrim trade route, its hull dull and gray, giving the impression of a forgotten cargo hauler. But looks were only the surface. Hidden, beneath the quiet exterior, was an Earth-made vessel unlike any other. A classified ship created by the Office of Human Strategic Anomalies, a division so secret that even many human governments didn't know its full name. The ship carried no heavy weapons, no flashy shields, and no broadcast beacon. What it did carry, however, was something far more powerful: ideas designed to twist perception, confuse technology, and manipulate minds. As it entered the quiet zone of the Andov Expanse, a region of neutral space often left unmonitored, the crew followed a silent routine, aware that this journey was not about delivering goods, but testing limits. Then, without warning, the ship's navigation screen lit up. A Karnak warship had locked onto them. The Karnak Ascendancy was known for its arrogance, a species of tall, scaled beings who believed themselves evolution's chosen. They made a habit of boarding weaker vessels and forcing the crew into labor or surrender. To them, the Seraphim drift looked like an easy target. No weapons, slow engines, and a human signature. The Karnak captain didn't hesitate. He ordered the drift's engines to be disabled remotely and prepared his soldiers to board. But before they could even reach the airlock, a single message came from the human ship. It was short, calm, and strange. You picked the wrong ship. No threats, no demands. Just that. The Karnak officers laughed. They assumed it was human. Bravado, a desperate bluff. But as the boarding teams entered the cargo ship, something unusual began. The airlock opened into a corridor that should have led straight to the cargo bay, but instead, it curved. Lights flickered, even though sensors showed full power. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming, though there was no weather in space. One soldier reported seeing shadows moving where there was no source of light. Another reported hearing what sounded like breathing, though the hallway was empty. Instruments began showing false readings. Heat signatures appeared and vanished. Gravity fields shifted just enough to make someone stumble, but not enough to trigger alarms. Then communications started to fail. One by one, the Karnak teams went silent. The lead vessel attempted to recall them, but there was no response. External cameras showed the ship still docked, untouched. Yet something felt deeply wrong. The Karnak captain grew uneasy. He tried to send a probe, but the feed only showed static. Minutes passed, then hours. Eventually, the drift powered up again and quietly drifted away from the Karnak warship as if nothing had happened. The humans didn't say another word. They just left. The Karnak crew debated whether to follow, but something about the silence, the calm confidence, held them back. It was as though the Terran ship had done nothing and yet had done everything. They ran diagnostics. Their own ship was fine, but the soldiers never came back, and their names disappeared from the roster as if they'd never existed. The Karnak Ascendancy, proud and fearless, was now left with questions they didn't know how to ask, and fears they didn't want to admit. As for the Seraphim drift, it continued on its path, its crew quiet, their mission unfolding exactly as planned. Somewhere deep in Earth's hidden command centers, analysts marked a silent success. No violence had occurred, and no battle had been fought. But the first seed had been planted in the minds of the stars, that humans were not just unpredictable, they were something else entirely, something best left undisturbed. The Karnak boarding parties, eager to claim their prize, stormed into the Seraphim drift. Their mission was clear: secure the human vessel, gather whatever resources could be exploited, and punish those who dared defy their authority. However, as they moved deeper into the abandoned cargo ship, an unsettling silence greeted them. The ship's systems were offline, and the interior environment was in disarray. The lights flickered in and out like a failing star, and the temperature, was uncomfortably cold one moment, then sweltering the next. They couldn't make sense of it. A Karnak officer, a seasoned veteran, checked his datapad but found no answers. The layout of the ship had changed. What had been a simple corridor now led into an open bay that should not have been there. When they turned to exit, they found themselves in a different place entirely, back near the airlock, or so it seemed. The ship's layout, once straightforward, now seemed to mock their sense of direction. Gravity fluctuated subtly, making the soldiers feel as if the deck was tilting, even though nothing on their instruments confirmed it. The air grew dense, almost as though the ship itself was alive and resisting their presence. "Something's wrong," muttered one of the soldiers. His voice trembled, but he couldn't place why. They pressed on, splitting into smaller groups to search for the missing crew or any clues. But after a few hours, the first sign of real danger appeared. One by one, the groups began reporting strange phenomena, doors opening into rooms that weren't supposed to exist, whispers on the comms that came from nowhere, and shadows that shifted unnaturally. A few soldiers started to panic. Some of them swore they had seen their comrades, only to turn a corner and find them gone. Others claimed to hear footsteps behind them, but when they turned around, no one was there. And still, the ship remained. Still, no alarms, no responses from the crew. It was as though the Seraphim Drift had been abandoned, yet it wasn't. The soldiers' reports grew more frantic. "The walls, they're closing in," one transmission shouted. "We're being separated." The last voice heard over the radio was a desperate cry for help, followed by dead silence. The recovery team, sent in from the HFY, arrived soon after, expecting to find a quick resolution to what seemed like a simple human trick. But as they approached the drift, their sensors gave conflicting reports. The ship was still there, but there were no signs of life, no heat signatures, no life support readings, nothing. Still, the Seraphim Drift drifted on, unmoving, like an abandoned ghost ship caught in the emptiness of space. As the HFY closed in, they attempted to make contact, but the communication systems were as unreliable as the drift itself. They could not hail the ship, nor could they access any internal feeds. The Seraphim Drift simply hung there, as though it had never been touched. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The HFY's captain stood frozen, his face pale. How could a ship disappear without a trace? How could it move without leaving any evidence of its actions? Then came a strange signal. A lone Karnak scout ship had managed to escape the Seraphim Drift's orbit. Its crew was frantic, terrified. They sent out a transmission, brief, desperate, and filled with panic. "This ship, it thinks..." The captain's voice crackled through the static. "It's alive. It..." The transmission abruptly cut off. Silence followed. No signal. No explanation. Nothing. The HFY crew stared at their screens in disbelief. The scout ship, its last message hanging in the air, was all they had. The realization dawned on them slowly, creeping like a cold wave over their minds. The Seraphim Drift was not merely a ship. It was something more, something beyond their understanding. It wasn't just an anomaly. It was something they had no defense against. As the shadows of deep space enveloped them, the officers of the HFY looked at one another, each silently acknowledging that they had been bested in a way they could never have predicted. Somewhere, hidden in the dark reaches of space, the Office of Human Strategic Anomalies waited. The test, it seemed, was going even better than they had hoped. Whispers moved faster than ships. Within just a few weeks of the Seraphim Drift's silent encounter, rumors began to spread like wildfire across the outer sectors. Traders, smugglers, and deep space scouts all claimed to have seen a strange Terran ship, sometimes trailing silently behind them, other times appearing for a moment on their sensors before vanishing entirely. Karnak colonies, once proud and loud, began reporting strange sightings. A human vessel hovering in orbit for hours, not responding to any communication, and then simply disappearing. The reports had one thing in common: fear. No shots fired, no battles fought, just a growing sense that something was out there, watching. In smaller systems near Karnak space, things began to shift. Local leaders refused entry to Karnak patrol ships, afraid of being caught up in whatever curse the Phantom Terran ship had brought. Trade routes changed, alliances grew shaky. No one wanted to risk crossing paths with a force that didn't attack with weapons, but with fear. Behind the scenes, the Office of Human Strategic Anomalies, OHSA, quietly activated a plan years in the making. Known only to a few as the Panic Index, it was a psychological operation that did not use ships or soldiers, but data, illusions, and timing. OHSA began planting carefully edited footage on public networks, clips of ghostly Terran vessels appearing beside Karnak warships, audio recordings filled with static and broken messages, and strange echoes on comms that suggested the Seraphim Drift was everywhere and nowhere at once. They hacked minor news channels to share eyewitness stories of haunted space, unexplained ship malfunctions, and quiet voices over radio waves that said nothing and yet caused distress. Simulated sensor readings were planted in long-range scans, making it look like the drift had entered orbit around key Karnak planets. In truth, it never left deep space. But the illusion worked. The Karnak ascendancy, usually strong in posture and loud in their claims, went quiet. Their warships began avoiding sectors with any sign of human activity. Pilots reported being unnerved before even stepping into their ships. Some spoke of dreams, of cold metal corridors and doors that led to nowhere. All of it was by design. OHSA didn't want war. They wanted doubt, fear, caution. And now they had it. Other alien species began to notice. The Ivari, a quiet species of researchers, halted their joint project with the Karnak Navy, citing psychological instability. The Myron, once indifferent to humans, issued a quiet statement of neutrality, encouraging peaceful relations with Earth. In diplomatic circles, questions were raised. What kind of species builds a ship that never fires a shot, yet leaves entire fleets trembling? What sort of minds design a vessel that hunts the soul rather than the body, that changes reality without touching it? The mystery of the Seraphim Drift grew larger than the ship itself. Stories became legends, and legends became warnings. The Coalition Command, which governed the balance between species, had no choice but to act. They dispatched a diplomatic envoy to Earth, not with threats, but with a message wrapped in uneasy respect. Call off your ghost. You've made your point. On Earth, in a hidden OHSA facility beneath layers of encrypted silence, agents received the message without expression. Their operation had gone beyond expectations. A single ship, acting without firepower, had shifted the tone of interstellar diplomacy. The goal was never destruction, only deterrence. And now, humanity was no longer seen as a young species finding its place. It was something more, quiet, calculated, and capable of making the galaxy pause without a single battle. The Seraphim Drift had vanished into the black, its mission on standby, its legend growing stronger by the day. And across the stars, captains now double-checked their scanners, not for enemies, but for echoes. Because once you've been touched by the drift, you never quite forget it. Inside the core chamber of the Karnak Ascendancy, deep beneath layers of armored metal and pride, a war council gathered in uneasy silence. It was not the usual display of power and confidence. Faces once filled with arrogance now showed confusion and concern. The Phantom Terran ship, what many were now calling the Whisper Ghost, had done something far worse than damage their fleet. It had broken their certainty. The high strategist, surrounded by holographic records and sensor data, stood still as report after report showed the same impossible facts. No official Terran document mentioned the Seraphim drift. No known registry had any data. Ship logs that should have recorded its engine type, build date, or mission purpose returned empty. Even Earth's open communications denied knowledge of such a ship. It was as if the drift was never built, as if it had emerged from the shadows of deep space on its own. And yet, it had clearly been real. Too many incidents, too many confirmed sightings. Something was out there. Some commanders feared it was a new type of Terran weapon, perhaps powered by technology the Karnak couldn't yet understand. But that theory didn't explain how it caused fear without firing a single shot. The Council tried to trace its last known path, but the trail always ended the same way, nowhere. Like following a shadow across starlight. Stranger still was the growing behavior shift across the stars. Terran ships, even regular trade vessels, now traveled without fear. They entered neutral zones, passed through former Karnak-controlled sectors, and were never challenged. Karnak ships, once eager to engage or intimidate, turned the other way. In several documented cases, entire patrol squadrons fled upon detecting a Terran freighter. Not because of firepower, but because they couldn't be sure what lay behind the hull. Every Terran ship became a potential ghost, a symbol of what might be waiting inside. The fear of the unknown was more powerful than the truth. And so, within quiet meeting rooms and empty hallways, Karnak officers whispered about the drift like a ghost story told to frighten cadets. The fear was spreading, but it didn't come from battle. It came from silence. Meanwhile, back on Earth, in the hidden levels of OHS's command base, the team in charge of the Seraphim operation observed the results with calm professionalism. Their goal had never been to defeat the Karnak ascendancy through war. Instead, they wanted to reshape perception. They understood something others did not, that in space, where borders are invisible and enemies are far away, fear moves faster than fleets. With reports confirming that the Karnak had stopped challenging human movements, and other species now treating Earth with quiet caution, OHSA made a final decision. The Seraphim drift would go dark. No further operations, no more appearances, no more ghost sightings. The campaign had ended. The mission was a success. No weapons had been used. No battles recorded. Not a single life had been lost. And yet, across 3 sectors, entire strategies were being rewritten. The Terrans had not only drawn a line in the stars, they had done it without saying a word. From that moment forward, the galaxy would think twice before targeting a human ship. OHSA archived the files, buried the name Seraphim Drift, and returned to silence. The ship itself slipped into deep space, its current location unknown, perhaps even to Earth. But the legend remained, and in the minds of many, that was more permanent than any fleet. Somewhere in the dark, the drift was still out there, or at least that's what everyone believed. And belief was all OSA needed. A ghost didn't need to be real to be feared. It only needed to be remembered. Months passed quietly, but the galaxy did not forget. In the cold emptiness near the Andov expanse, a derelict Karnak destroyer drifted, alone, silent, and still. Its nameplate, once gleaming with the pride of the ascendancy, was worn and faded. A small alien research vessel, belonging to a peaceful exploratory species called the Vereen, docked gently onto its side. They had picked up faint energy readings, nothing threatening, but strange enough to investigate. When they entered the Chi, Karnak vessel, they found no signs of battle, no burns, no broken systems, no damage of any kind. The lights flickered dimly, as if the ship had simply fallen asleep. And when the Vereen made their way to the crew chambers, they discovered every Karnak officer and soldier lying quietly in stasis pods. None were harmed. Their bodies were healthy, but not a single one responded. Their minds, according to scans, were suspended in an artificial dream state, peaceful but unreachable, as if their consciousness had simply chosen to step away. The logs told no story of panic or struggle. There were no last messages or warnings. Instead, it showed a gradual decline, systems slowly shutting down, commands becoming more passive, decisions softer and slower, until eventually, the crew had simply stopped making them. The researchers didn't understand how or why, but they recorded everything and left quietly, sensing that whatever had happened here was meant to remain undisturbed. Word of the discovery spread quietly among the outer colonies, traveling not through official reports but whispered stories. It was a mystery wrapped in fear. And on Earth, deep within the hidden chambers of the Office of Human Strategic Anomalies, the story arrived just as another project began. The success of the Seraphim Drift campaign had changed everything. It had shown that control wasn't always won through weapons or force, but through perception, silence, and suggestion. With the galaxy now stepping carefully around Terran vessels, OHSA launched a new initiative, known only to a few as Project Serenity. Its mission was not to build fear, but to maintain it. Through quiet observation, subtle signals, and small manipulations, they would ensure that humanity remained seen as unpredictable and untouchable. The lesson was simple. Peace can be kept not by power, but by the fear of awakening it. And so, as human ships traveled the stars, they did so calmly and without resistance. Where once Karnak cruisers would have blocked their paths, now they cleared the way. Other species began requesting quiet alliances with Earth, not out of fear of war, but out of respect for something they couldn't quite explain. The Seraphim Drift was never seen again, but its name lived on, not in military records, but in the stories told by pilots in distant starports and lonely space stations. Around smoky tables, over cups of synth drinks, travelers shared a new kind of cautionary tale. It began with a laugh, perhaps, but always ended in silence. Never mess with a Terran ship that says nothing, they'd whisper, because if they're quiet, they're already winning. And in that silence, deeper than space itself, the galaxy adjusted. Earth had not claimed territory or demanded submission. It had not fired upon its enemies or threatened the balance. But it had changed the rules. It had drawn a boundary in the minds of those who once looked down upon it. And now, as the stars turned and time moved forward, the most powerful force in the galaxy was no longer a fleet or a weapon. It was a single thought, planted carefully and left to grow. What if the next Terran ship is another drift,